Hello. Hello. So last week I made a video talking about jazz and jazz music. And I talked a whole bunch about kind of where I got influences from and different parts of the world, different cultures and whatever. And one of the big ones I talked about was West African music. And like, as I was doing the research for that video, it just made me think back to my whole choir experience basically. And I suddenly realized there's a lot of African choral music that's out there for Western choirs to do. And that's just purely based on, what I've performed myself, what I've seen other choirs perform, and having looked through the catalog many times in preparation for teaching younger choirs. Ow! That was a bad idea. That was such a stupid idea. Ow! Okay, don't do that for the memes, ladies and gentlemen. Ow! Okay. So my observation of this was mostly just based around, what I remember performing in choirs, what I've seen other people perform in choirs, and also having looked through the catalog of what's out there for a lot of choirs to do, because, I have looked with the idea of teaching middle school and high school choirs how to sing choral music. And I always felt that when you looked in the genre of world music, that African music was represented more than almost any other area of the world in comparison to Middle East, Asia, Australia, more folk regions of Europe, because I wouldn't consider, the major Western cultures of Europe to be in that category, because obviously a lot of our Western music comes from Western European traditions. So of course they're going to be really overrepresented. But if you put those aside, I always felt that African music was one of the largest categories out there, and I had no idea why. And I thought about this as I was making my video last week. It's I remember singing this song, and I've helped teach this song and this one, and there just seems to be a lot of African choral music out there. And why is that? So basically I wanted to know two things. Was my theory right, or was it just because I was thinking about it and maybe I was having some kind of bias looking back, thinking oh, I must have sung a ton of African music, but it was no different. And then also, if I was right in my theory, why was my theory right? So I did some digging. I went on to J.W. Pepper, which, for those of you who do not know, J.W. Pepper is basically every music educator's best friend for basically any kind of traditional classical music type ensemble. So that goes for band, orchestra, choir, basically those big three things. J.W. Pepper is your go-to site. And it will have the best overall selection of, if you need a piece for some kind of concert, or if you need a piece for some kind of competition, especially competition stuff, they are the go-to site. So I kind of used that as my starting off point to kind of test my theory out a little bit. So here's how I went about testing my theory. So obviously I went to choral, but under the different categories I chose school out of all of them because I wanted something pretty middle of the road. So church is going to obviously be biased towards more religious music, which is not what I'm looking for here. Community and collegiate would have also been a good alternative, but collegiate I felt was a little bit more on the advanced side, and I wanted to keep it, like I said, pretty middle of the road, pretty vanilla. I didn't want anything too terribly easy. I didn't want anything too terribly difficult. I just wanted some music that was pretty mid-tier in terms of its difficulty. So I felt that would probably be around high school level, which is why I chose school. So scrolling down, you can already see that the first song right there says Jambo Rafiki. That's already an African song, because Rafiki is Swahili language. So I scrolled down to the bottom of the page to see if there were any other African songs on there. I didn't end up finding any, but the fact that there's already one kind of featured on there was a little bit of a hint to my theory, but didn't prove anything, obviously. So from the main category of school, I had to narrow down what I was looking for, because it wouldn't let me just automatically go to world music or African music. JW Pepper is really annoying like that. I really kind of hate it. Sometimes I wish I could just find SITB music across the board and I would select the difficulty. But it makes you narrow it down into these moderately arbitrary categories. I mean, it makes sense if you really need some concert music. It's kind of nice, but I don't know. Sometimes it's just really annoying to have to go through all these category hoops first. But anyways, out of all of these categories, I felt like the best one was gonna be the SATB and Divisi concert selections, because otherwise the other categories were like Christmas and holiday, pop and jazz, like none of those were gonna fit what I needed. And then out of the concert ones, the most like common arrangement you're gonna find for choir is gonna be SATB. So I figured number one, that would have the most selection of songs. And number two, that's what most choirs are going to be singing in. So again, I felt like that was middle of the road, what I was looking for. Going through there, again, we have an African song being featured, Sisi Moja, which I believe is Swahili. But like I said, right away, it's the very first example. I haven't even narrowed it down to be specifically world pieces. So again, it's kind of already leaning towards that. When you look at world pieces, African music is the most represented out of all the different areas of the world. So from here, I went to the categories and I tried to find, like I said, multicultural. So basically this is world music. They don't have one that's called, that's what they call their world music section, is multicultural. And so right away, these are kind of the results that I found. So Sisi Moja, like I said, is an African one. We got Zambia, so Zambian folk song. Baba Yetu, that's another African one. That one I believe is Swahili again? I have to double check that one. Another African one, you can see these in the descriptions. This one, okay, this one, see, this one's a one that's not African. French Canadian. So there's a South African one, Spanish and English, and it goes on and on and on. And so basically as I was searching through this whole entire catalog, because when I went to SITB, high school level, multicultural, all that kind of stuff I narrowed it down to, it gave me a total of 62 songs, which seems kind of small to me. I feel like there are more on its catalog, but that's just all they gave me. Again, from the weird way that they narrow down some of their music. And what I found out of those 63 results was that African songs represented 30 of them. 30 of them. That is almost half of the songs. So clearly I was on to something here with this theory about there's a lot of African music representation. So I wanted to see like what I could find. Why was this? What was the reasoning for this? To me, there didn't seem to be like a specific reason why African music would be so heavily featured over other cultures of the world, especially if, you know, a lot of the reasons why people like to do multicultural songs in choir is because they want to expose the singers to music of other cultures that may not be their own. But having 30 out of those 63 songs be from Africa, that seems like a crazy bias to me. Not a bad one. I love singing African music, but like it's such a weird, specific bias towards all the other cultures. Or against all the other cultures, I guess. So I tried to do some quick research to try to figure out like what was the reasoning for this. But I found it really difficult to sit down and try to answer this question, because it was like a thing of, where do you even begin? Like, you can't just type into Google, why is African music so highly represented in choral world music? Google's not just gonna have that answer, and it didn't seem to be something a lot of people talked about. Otherwise, I feel like I might have a better idea about this. So I basically just started searching on Google some key terms to see what I could come up with. I started by searching African choral music in Google Scholar to see if anybody had like any articles from journals, or if anybody had just written any kind of essays about anything talking about why African music was such an important part of choral music, or at the very least, why it's so represented in the world music that most American or kind of Western tradition choirs sing. And I got a lot of articles kind of talking about the tradition of African choirs and African choral music, but nothing that really stuck out to me as to be like why it's so represented. So the best thing I could think of was like, well, maybe I should compare it to choral traditions of other cultures. Ooh, that was a weird noise. And I got some answers there. For example, when I looked up Asian choral music, I didn't get hardly any results. I didn't get anything talking about choirs of Asia. I got a lot of results for the choirs of Africa, but not so much for the choirs of Asia. So it seemed to me that there was definitely an emphasis on choral or community singing in African traditions than maybe compared to Asian traditions, based on just the base results that I was getting. There was nothing super concrete or clear on this, so it was mostly me just making really educated guesses based on what I could find. But again, like, there was seeming to be a little bit of a distinct bias towards African cultures having a stronger emphasis on choral singing than maybe the rest of the world. But it wasn't like I didn't find any Asian choral music. I didn't find many in this specific search result. Like I said, it was kind of a small amount, and I really only ended up finding 3 Asian ones, all of which were from India, and 9 Middle Eastern ones, 7 of which were Hebrew or were of Israeli/Hebrew traditions, 1 of which was Arabic, and 1 of which was technically more Africa, but it's also part of the Middle Eastern tradition, was from Sudan. But it's still not nearly the powerhouse that African music just seems to be. So then I tried a little bit of a different approach. I thought maybe there was a difference in the way that music kind of played a role in the societies of these cultures, and maybe that would give me a better idea as to why African music seemed to be almost overrepresented in world music. And I came across this quote from the African Philosophy Reader, which is a collection of essays by, from what I could tell, various African authors. So here's a quote from the essay called Some African Cultural Concepts by Steve Biko. So he says, "Nothing dramatizes the eagerness of Africans to communicate with each other than their love for song and rhythm. Music in the African cultures features in all emotional states. When we go to work, we are sharing the burdens and pleasures of the work we are doing through music. This particular facet, strangely enough, has filtered through to the present day. Tourists always watch with amazement the synchrony of music and action as Africans working at a roadside use the picks and shovels with well-timed precision to the accompaniment of a background song. Battle songs were a feature of the long march to war in the olden days. Girls and boys never played a game without using rhythm and movement as its basis. In other words, with Africans, music and rhythm were not luxuries, but part and parcel of our way of communication. Any suffering we experienced was made much more real by song and rhythm." So that quote alone did show me that there does seem to be a very, very, very strong emphasis of the use of music in everyday lives. And it does seem to be a very communal thing in African cultures. And it didn't really totally answer my question as to why Africa over many other cultures, because it's not like other cultures don't have musical traditions. Obviously, basically every single culture in the world does in some way, shape, or form. But none of the research I was doing ended up leading me towards a clear answer to my question. The best I could really get was just, well, it might be something in this realm based on, a lack of evidence, but there was no actual clear answer until I accidentally stumbled across a key piece of information. You see, when I said there was 30 different pieces in the African category from what I found on J.W. Pepper, when that number was broken down into various subcategories of what countries specifically the songs came from, I found this kind of breakdown. 7 of the songs were what I'd consider to be generically African. They used some kind of African language, or the description of the song said it was inspired by African music, but no specific location was ever truly given. One of the songs came from Zambia. Oh wait, hold on, there's 2. I have it on here twice. 3 of the songs were Kenyan, 2 of the songs were from Zambia, 1 of the songs was Namibian, 1 of the songs was from the Congo, and 16 of the songs were from South Africa. So not only was Africa being basically overrepresented in choral world music, but South Africa was being overrepresented in an overrepresented category. So there was clearly something going on here. And I could not figure out what it was until I accidentally stumbled across a certain genre of South African music. Because you see, what I didn't realize is there is actually a specific type of South African choral music that became popular throughout the mid to late 20th century. And that is, bear with me, I hope I say this right, Zikatamia. Zikatamia. So, what is it? Well, it's an a cappella choral music tradition of South Africa that came out in the 20th century and was this good mix of kind of Western traditions of music and the traditional music of South Africa. But it started to become popular because it was more than just, you know, your basic choir going up on stage and singing a song. They also incorporated African elements such as a little bit of movement with their singing, because if you sing African music, it's really hard to stand still. You really should not stand still if you sing African music at all. So these choirs are up on stage performing traditional African music, singing a cappella, and it was often performed by these groups and these choirs that would go touring around and perform competitions of various styles of songs. So arguably the most well-known group of this Zikatamia genre is the group Ladysmith's Black Mambazo, which is an all-male South African a cappella choral group. So their group was founded in the 1960s, but really started to gain popularity in the 80s when they were featured on Paul Simon's album, Graceland. Now, if you really want a good example of what this genre sounds like, the song The Lion Sleeps Tonight is probably one of the better known songs from this genre. So you probably know this song from the Tokens version of this, and that's a little bit more of a pop version from this genre and from this style. The song was originally written back all the way in the 1920s and was often recorded and re-recorded in this Zikatamia style, also known as Mbube, which is much easier to say. But the funny thing is, this style was also called Mbube because of this song, because this song originally went by the title Mbube rather than The Lion Sleeps Tonight. And that's how this genre of music really started to gain a lot of traction. And so because of that, then African music in general, and specifically South African music, it seems really caught the eye of people who are interested in world music, and then especially world music for choirs. And so, you know, if that's going to be the most popular culture in world music, then that's probably also going to be the one that has the most songs written down about it, and then has the most sheet music sold and given up to choirs in high school and college and middle school and whatever. And I had no idea about any of this until I just decided to go, what is this? What is up with this? So yeah, it turns out The Lion Sleeps Tonight is the biggest reason as to why, if you've ever sung in a choir and you've sung world music from a choir, it is the reason why African music seems to be so overrepresented. I always wondered the answer to that question, and now I have the answer. And now I've given that answer to you, the audience. You're welcome. Leave a comment down below. Tell me your thoughts. You know what? If you're gonna leave a comment down below, I want to hear, if you've been in a choir, what are some of your favorite songs that you've sung? What are, like, especially if you've done world music before, what are some of your favorite songs before? Because I found several of them that I've done before, just kind of searching through the music. And if I can find decent recordings of them, I will put that in the description down below so that you can also go and listen to them, because they're all great, beautiful, wonderful songs. Alright, with that is the end of my video. And I will see you next time. Goodbye!